The anti-government demonstrators say they plan to keep up the Bangkok shutdown for a month. And earlier, I asked Phelim Kine, Deputy Director of the Asia Division for Human Rights Watch, if they have enough momentum to maintain those protests as elections are scheduled in just a few weeks.
I think really what we have to look at is the powers and intentions of the government in this situation. It's an extremely volatile situation. And the fact is that with these thousands of protesters taking to the streets, it's in the hands of the government to ensure that there is a non-violent response to what's happening in the streets, which essentially is peaceful protest, which is protected under Thailand's constitution and under international human rights instruments.
Well, do you think Prime Minister Shinawatra is handling the situation the best she can? It seems that she's tried to communicate with the other side, or is she simply in a position where it doesn't really matter what she does or says?
Well, to her credit so far, she has handled it without bringing in the military and without violence by security forces against unarmed protesters. And I think it's important to point out that Prime Minister Shinawatra is operating in terms of wanting to avoid what happened in 2010 when there were similar mass protests in Bangkok in which almost 100 unarmed protesters were shot dead in the streets, and for which there has been absolutely no judicial response or redress. So she's very cognizant of the fact that this precedent has been very damaging for Thailand's cohesiveness, for its international image, and it really wants to do the right thing. And so far, she's doing it.
Well, how do you see this all playing out? Did you think it would have gone on as long as it has? You know, we're 2 months in now, and there has been some violence, and there have been some deaths.
Well, if you look at recent history in Thailand, when there are mass protests like this that are allowed to continue without the intervention of security forces, without violent confrontations, eventually what happens is that public opinion turns against the protesters, and they tend to peter out. So, you know, the government might not like what these protesters are doing. It might be an inconvenience. It might be disrupting the normal flow of traffic and business. But the fact is, again, these protesters are exercising their legal constitutional right of protest and expression and assembly. And it's in the government's hands to respect that and to ensure that you know, hotter heads in the government or around it are not allowed to get the upper hand and provoke some violent confrontation that will hurt or kill unarmed protesters.
You know, this certainly cannot be helping the economy at all, especially with the gridlock there in the city. But, you know, tourism is big business as well.
Tourism is big business. And we're hoping that the fact that tourism is such a big part of the Thai economy and that the Thai government is very cognizant of its public image, both at home and internationally, that it will restrain any impulse toward rash, violent reactions to these protests. You know, what we urge is nonviolence. Let these protests run their course as they will, as public opinion starts to respond to how the protests are taking an impact on the city and on the economy. Rash, impulsive acts that could harm innocent, unarmed protesters are the worst thing that could happen for Thailand's government, for its public image, and for its tourism industry.
All right, Mr. Phelim Kine, we appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you for joining us on our show.